attributes and characteristics matter more to success in any domain than technical skills. For me, looking at Transferable Everything has been about trying to give people language that they can build around a way of thinking in a sufficient way that's accessible for really everybody. It doesn't
teach the ability to actually self-reflect and identify those things as well.
Right. Your best friend, your partner, the business you work for, whatever, they can't always be all things.
Why people diminish their experiences and how we can get people to see the value in their experiences.
Maybe a lot of people can really do it, but then why isn't it happening? Where's the gap in application? How do you plan to write this book without it being sort of preachy?
You can either find it yourself through experience and trial and error. You can try to find it through mentors, any possible source, or you can get it through Transferable Everything.
Okay, so this actually finally has real potential to be the first podcast that we actually post.
Sweet.
So the idea for the podcast, at the beginning anyways, is going to be for us to discuss the development and the building of the book Transferable Everything, and the explore the premise, explore my experiences and some of your experiences, and sort of work through each episode, one chapter at a time, so we can verbally articulate. This is something that helps me personally, verbally articulate the ideas, critique them in real time, and hopefully it gives anyone who actually decides to listen an opportunity to see some of the behind the scenes, if you will, of writing the book Transferable Everything. So far, there's sufficient content for the foundation of each idea within each chapter. But there's more work to be done, without a doubt. So the idea is formulated, it's there, but just getting to that point has been such a challenge. And I've personally struggled so much with it, and now I've asked you to join me and help me.
Sure.
And in addition to that, start this podcast and give everyone the behind the scenes of the struggles as well that I've been going through, and that hopefully you'll go through with me. So the premise, this is probably the best place to start. The premise of Transferable Everything, and this is probably a good place for you to help critique and start to peel some things apart. It's the broader thesis is, and there's a few of them. So one of them is that attributes and characteristics matter more to success in any domain than technical skills. And I think a lot of people accept that probably as true inherently. But then it begs the broader question, and maybe this is something we can land on for a little bit, is why, as individuals, this is something that's puzzled me, why do we as individuals and as a society put so much of our resources, and by resources I mean all resources, not just monetary resources, but energy, cognitive load, our time, all of those resources into technical skill mastery rather than intentionally developing those attributes and characteristics that we have, if it is true that they do matter more.
Sure.
And that's something that's puzzled me. And so far, up to this point, everyone I've spoken to about this thesis and this idea has agreed with the initial premise. Absolutely. Characteristics and attributes do matter more. And so then I've now landed on that question. And I don't know if writing the book will answer it. Maybe through the journey of the podcast, maybe we'll find some answers, and that would be interesting. But why do we? I do think, and then I'll hand it over to you. I do think that a lot of people develop them passively, or as a byproduct of their day-to-day life and so forth. But I very specifically mean intention, and that's kind of a bit of a cliche buzzword today, but I mean it in its purest form, where we intentionally develop those skills and attributes. So anyways,
I mean, to segue directly off of what you just said, intentional practice gives you intentional results.
Right.
It's a really interesting piece because it's very clear that a well-rounded individual who has characteristics and attributes that allow them to be successful across domains is something that you want to have.
Yeah.
We could talk about the responsibility of cultivating those things. Where does that lie?
Yes, that's an important question.
Is it extreme ownership on the individual's part to recognize maybe they're deficient in some areas? And then an added layer is you need to teach the ability to actually self-reflect and identify those things as well.
Right.
We have so many structures, right, that exist in the world around us, and we could speak to a number of them. You have the family, you have the education system, et cetera. You know, it's where exactly does the responsibility in cultivating these things lie? And when it comes to technical skill, it's very clear that the responsibility lies in intentional educational institutions for a particular medium, or like employers within like a corporate or professional structure.
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, a very good question about where does the responsibility lie. And I think, like most things, where that responsibility lies pivots and it moves. Because at some point there is the extreme ownership, and at some point it has to be on you. Maybe that's 25 plus. You know, once we've allowed for the frontal cortex to develop, and now it's yours. Now extreme ownership is 100% applicable. You know, but before that, where does it apply? Of course, we want within the family unit. I think anything you can develop is best done within the family unit. But then we also have to be realistic to, you know, the dynamics of family units not looking the same, and that's okay. And things that happen. And then you look to society, and society arguably has a responsibility to be, in some instances, a bit of a safety net, a catch-all or a supporting mechanism for the family in education and technical mastery. Technical mastery or development makes complete sense. And so I sort of land on, it's a combination of both. In a perfect world, the attributes and characteristics can be developed within the family unit. And no matter what, that's probably where they can be maximized.
Sure.
However, I think the school institution could definitely pick up a lot of slack in teaching some things like ancient philosophy, modern philosophy, a little more about psychology generally, and really baking in there the self-reflection, like looking inward more generally. And I think those things alone, even the absence of a family unit not being able to really hold that up, would go such a long way, because for as long as someone's in that institution, within those the confines of the institution, by the time they're 25 and extreme ownership comes into play, at least they have some foundational knowledge. And I also see it's not a one-time class. The value of this is year over year classes that would bake into this. That being said, I don't want to go too much into the school side, because we have another chapter on education more broadly, and that kind of addresses the school system. But in any case, it's an overview. One of the other premises, sticking with characteristics and virtues, is that even for somebody that wants to really make a strong case for technical mastery, technical skills, the premise is that even if those are deeply important, and for some industries they are, like you really have to prioritize those things, right? You know, say engineering or medical doctors and scientists and things like that. But I would still make the argument that even where those are so important, you can't develop them to the highest level without having first developed those characteristics and attributes anyways. So we all may as well make that our foundation.
Sure.
Because even if you're going to go in that direction, and I sort of liken it to an athlete, and I've used this example many times, you've heard me use it, but if I'm an outfield player, soccer player on the pitch, and I think that I'm pretty good at what I do. I'm playing for the best team in my geographical area, but I want to become a professional. So my proficiency level in all areas has to be extremely high, the best of the best in order to get there. Well, I might be the best distributor or passer of the ball in my geographic area. That's why I'm playing for the best team. And that's amazing. That's an achievement in of itself. However, to get to that next level, if I don't have a sufficient amount of humility to look within myself and evaluate my abilities and recognize that this is good here and that's great, but there's a lot more work I have to do to get to where I want to go. I'm at a 65% in terms of the best. If I only look at my geographical area, I'm 95%. But in terms of the big picture, the big world, the people I would actually compete against to become a professional, I'm only 65%.
Right.
And so I have a lot of work to do. And so I can't actually go to the space, create the time for the technical mastery if I don't have a sufficient amount of humility to recognize that that's required anyways. Sure. And so I see that as sort of the rebuttal in advance to that notion. And I think we've probably seen some of that a little bit in our time working professionally with people where there's like, I don't know if you want to call it a level of complacency at a certain point within technical mastery. Like, I'm the biggest fish in this little pond.
Right.
And so that's kind of good enough. I've made it.
Right.
So anyways, I offer that up to you.
Yeah. You touched on something, I'm probably going to say it in different words, but a lot of like the character building side outside of technical proficiency or what you need in order to actually build technical proficiency is legitimate, honest self-reflection.
Yeah.
And like critical analysis of yourself. Which is something that can be taught. It's something that can be learned, but I don't know if enough people have recognized the importance of that.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm getting away from what
no, please
you wanted
go.
to talk about, but effectively, I would argue that in order to build true technical proficiency, you need to be able to reflect.
Yeah.
And it's something that needs to be cultivated a lot, insofar as what I see in other individuals. The lights are on, but there's not enough like looking backwards and reflecting on something and trying to determine why you got the outcome that you got.
Yeah.
So for instance, you could be that 95% across the board, but you don't even know why that's the case. You might be misattributing your success to something that's not actually the case. Right.
I think that's a really good point. That's sort of the Malcolm Gladwell's outliers, if you will, is that, even the most successful people sometimes misattribute at least part of their success or why they got there to things that they just maybe didn't understand.
Yeah. So for instance, maybe you do have some character traits that are maybe would be considered undesirable, but you attribute those things to being the reason why you're successful due to lack of self-reflection.
Yeah, and maybe to keep going down this path as well, there's something, and I don't think we've yet touched on it in the book, and maybe it doesn't make it in the book, I don't know. It's something that I've had to work on as a professional, as a leader of an organization, of a company, and that's sometimes the attributes or the things that maybe did attribute to your success now is no longer something that attributes to success at the next level. And that's an interesting one as well. So like, for example, in entrepreneurship, one of the most common ones is work ethic, right? So like work ethic is undeniably important. I don't think anyone would say anything bad about that. And in fact, it's a chapter in the book for a reason. But work ethic has different forms, right? And a lot of us put our work ethic into the form of actually working on our business or our thing, and forget that at some point, most of that work actually has to be on ourselves. Because we need to improve ourselves as leaders, as CEOs, executives, in order to allow the company to continue to grow, because we have to first grow ourselves.
Right.
And so if you got to, 5 million in revenue by just really just gritty outworking your competition, in the weeds, any business coach will tell you, well, like, that's not going to get you, at least once you hit 10 million, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. And outside of like the revenue threshold, there's some situations you just can't outwork.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so that gritty work in the weeds with your team, and that might be fun, or you might build your identity around some of that. And, to be fair, that's what a lot of Transferable Everything is ultimately going to be about, is that identity piece. Or your, a lot of your confidence, because of some insecurities you have, comes from, well, like, I feel like I'm doing good work in this space. And so you continue to do that. Or your insecurity is that you can't let go of the thing.
Yeah.
And now you've hindered success from your own characteristics and attributes that once gave you success in the first place.
Sure.
And so that's interesting as well. And it's only through deep reflection, analysis, objective, critical thinking that you can land there.
I mean, speaking from a personal standpoint, before discussing like some of the notions within the book, I don't think I had even thought about my characteristics or attributes with the same language that you're putting forth.
Sure.
So, like, I can come across as humble in some situations, but I'd never really explored the notion of humility or tried to define it or understand what it meant. And only now that I have, you can kind of look into whether or not it genuinely is humility, or if I'm leveraging it correctly, or maybe I am being too self-critical in one area, and that's preventing me from expressing that humility correctly, or misattributing humility to other things. If you catch my drift.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that touches on the intent. And I think intent is important. And so for me, looking at Transferable Everything has been about trying to help people, or give people language that they can build around a way of thinking in a sufficient way that's accessible for really everybody. It doesn't have to be, a 600-page massive philosophical book that they have to go into, and that's probably going to rock their world. It's been about accessibility in the language. And some of Transferable Everything is, and we've discussed this, and I've had to wrap my mind around this. Some of it is new, and actually the next chapter for this is nothing new, which is about how none of this is actually new, but also recognizing that in fact some of it is, and that's around the language and the structure and the framework that we'll inevitably get into, but I think that's important, and it's nice to hear you even recognize that.
Yeah, and again, it's only my experience. Maybe I was a little sheltered in some ways, but I think going back to the humility piece, growing up playing team sports as a kid, always being told, don't be a sore loser, but also don't be a sore winner.
Yeah.
And like, as a kid, I took that as, just don't be a dick, because people don't like that.
Sure.
But really what I was being taught was to be humble in victory.
Yeah.
But that language is not something that I was using, or it's not how it was taught to me, so I never thought in those terms. So to your point about making the language more accessible, maybe broadening the foundation that people have, generally speaking, so that they can work on cultivating these ideas or these skills or attributes within themselves, you need to know of a thing in order to mobilize that thing. So I think that's a very important level set to have.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think adding the accessibility, which is in some ways simplifying, but also I think acknowledging the depth of a thing. So the example you used is something that I struggled with. I was very much a hothead as a soccer player, got in a lot of trouble for it. And, you know, I would get the oversimplification of, you know, that's not appropriate, Daniel. Or, you know, you can't speak to the referee that way. And you know, especially in my older age, I understand that makes sense. But what I couldn't understand was like, okay, but I have all of these things. What do I do with it? So I have all of this passion, and I know I can attribute much of that passion to my success. I loved what I did. I was very passionate. I wanted to win. And looking backwards as well, I know that that's necessary for success. Now, when you're young, what happens is you're walking a bit of a tightrope and you kind of lean on the other side. And then all of a sudden you're getting advice from somebody saying, hey, don't be so passionate. You have misplaced passion or something to that effect. And there wasn't, it was an oversimplification. There wasn't enough language to help me understand like, hey, look, this passion is actually very good. It's fuel that is going to help you. It's going to serve you.
Sure.
Now, there are moments on this tight line where you can cross over. And, you know, when you do, I'm going to help point it out to you. You know, if a coach had talked to me about this, I'm going to help point it out to you. And we're going to dissect it. We're going to see where things came apart. And then hopefully for next time, you don't repeat that same mistake. And so I think it's equal parts the language and bringing it down to something that's digestible. One of the hard parts that I do want to acknowledge, because it sounded like for a second there I was placing blame on coaches for not having done that, and you know, everything is downstream. So the language they have is a product of whatever they were exposed to and so forth. But and I only mean it as a recognition, because if we first have to recognize it, then we can correct it.
Sure.
But one thing, if I was to speak directly to parents of athletes, I would remind them, especially athletes of team sports, I would remind them that the job of a coach is the team. Yes, of course, there's player development in there, of course, but it's the team first. And so a lot of parents will depend on the evaluation of a coach for their child athlete, or as I just described, it was this like mismet expectation of the coach not having sufficient language for this thing that is technically outside of their scope. Right. And so this kind of brings me back full circle to the moment where I was talking about intentionally developing these skills and adding resources. Now, full disclosure, I hope that at some point Transferable Everything can be that sort of a companion to coaches, teachers, families, and so forth, to help intentionally develop these characteristics and attributes. However, it's I say that to say I want to acknowledge that and remind parents that, you know, the coach can't be everything. You can't expect them to be all things. And that's true, to keep with the theme of Transferable Everything. That's true in most scenarios. Your best friend, your partner, the business you work for, whatever, they can't always be all things.
Sure.
And so then if I was to take some ownership and give it to parents, it would be, you know, part of that is to continue to explore other means of education and development beyond the traditional norms, and be that advocate and consider that for your children. So I thought I would just at least toss that in for those parents.
Yeah, there was something that came to mind while you were discussing that bit, and it goes back to my years playing house league soccer. Yes, sir.
Beautiful.
So all throughout my experience, every coach I ever had was also a parent of one of the players on the team. I had a coach one year who straight up to all of us said, "You're not here to learn how to play soccer. You're here to learn how to be a man."
Beautiful.
But he never explained what that meant. You know, it was the intent was a beautiful thing. in that like there's a lot to be gained from sport that's going to make me a better man. But he didn't have the language to teach us that.
Yeah.
And so as someone growing up, maybe there's certain things I experienced on that pitch or things that I saw that maybe he didn't call out or didn't correct. And then I was given a bad understanding of what being a man actually means.
Right.
Now we can, like, taking gender out of like the conversation, what it means to be like a good person, I guess we could,
Sure.
if we want to use that language.
Yeah.
I don't know. What was your like experience in sports? Did you have coaches that tried to be like people mentors on top of just coaches, or was it due to the level you were playing at? It was like a little more specific to the sport itself.
At the beginning, in my early years,
Yeah.
The coach I had, really, really wonderful man, family man. His son was actually my best friend growing up, and I would say I don't think he ever stepped out to say that was his intention.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it's so clear that that's what he was doing. And eventually, as we got older, and he demonstrated the most humility. We got to, I don't know, 13 or something, and he realized that he couldn't get us as a team to the next level. And he needed to take a step back, and a new coach came in. And that's probably when the shift happened for me in my relationship with coaches, where it went from, that type of coach, even at a very, very competitive level, to somebody who's deeply focused on results, performance, yes, individual development, setting a standard,
Sure.
having us reach it. He was very harsh. I saw so many players cry as kids, and very harsh. Okay. He made it easy for me to transition into the military with drill sergeants type of thing. But I also do think, especially in retrospect, that he did so from like a good place from his heart.
Yeah.
But the language he had, the understanding he had, it's very clear that that was the case.
Sure. And like, without speaking for him or for anybody else,
Yeah.
broadly speaking, I think anybody who gets into that coaching, obviously they have a love for the sport, but I think there's a level of wanting to be that person who can help develop people into bringing them to that next level, whether as an individual or as an athlete. But everybody's got a different toolkit.
Yeah.
And I think without it being a glaze or an ego stroke, a lot of what we've been discussing is providing an equal, not an equal playing field, but giving everybody accessibility or access to a toolbox, a language that is very precise and specific to these things.
Yeah.
I've just never seen it articulated in the same way.
Yeah. And I think that it's kind of morphed for me a little bit. Originally, when I was thinking about Transferable Everything and how the idea, the book will impact athletes and parents specifically, because it's much broader than that, but
Yeah.
for this portion, I thought through only that lens, the athletes and the parents, because they felt the most underserved in terms of attention. And that is true. But then through our conversation, through things sort of developing, it became clear that, well, coaches will need this too. So if the intent and the end result is to help the players and the parents, helping the coaches themselves and giving them accessibility to language and structure around some of these things is equally as important, because they're going to be dealing with them on a more consistent basis. And this kind of reminds me, based on what you said from that coach, there's like an aspect of Transferable Everything that is simply just, Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid,
Sure.
right? Paint the fence, wax the car, and here's the end outcome. But instead of just blindly doing those things without an understanding, I think we're at a place where we could concurrently do the things that are seemingly ridiculous in our training and our development, while also concurrently developing the knowledge around the thing that we're doing and why we're doing it, and all of that. And I think that's where there is some uniqueness to the language that we're trying to develop and build around this. Is, people have seen that so many times, and there's so many like Disney sports movies about that character development through sport, which is so real. And to be fair, it's not just sport, but it's easy for someone to create that in a movie scenario.
Sure.
But there's no language, there's no understanding or like deep curriculum that can be shared with people about how to do that. And I think that's clearly an opportunity. I see it as, but and now more than anything, a responsibility to try and share that. And it pulls. I had already started writing Transferable Everything really when the Book of Five Rings was sort of put in front of me, and I was just blown away because of that quote. Once you know the way broadly, you see it in all things, which is Miyamoto Musashi. And that for me was like, oh my goodness, there's ancient context of something I've been thinking so deeply about. And so it feels like the responsibility, but also an honor to try and create language around that.
Sure. Yeah, and going off the quote as well, you need to know the way first in order to see it in all things.
Yes.
And so you can either find it yourself through experience and trial and error. You can try to find it through mentors, any possible source, or you can get it through Transferable Everything.
Yes. I love the plug. Thank you. This aspect of Transferable Everything is more palatable for people, right? I think they feel like they can connect to it, but there's a dichotomy, and it's even in how the book will be written, because there's two components. There's the development of the skills and attributes, and that's part of the premise. The distillation of a principle through an experience that can transcend the thing you experienced it with.
Right.
And I think that's also one of the things. And this has been really hard to write into the book. It feels like we're trying to cover a million things here, right? Yeah. And I think that's something that currently today isn't as well expressed in the book, at least at the beginning. I think towards the end, we've created some use cases and stuff through the framework, but I think that's a little bit harder for people to understand. So for example, oftentimes we look at things as like being unattainable because I don't have the experience, if you will, to do the thing, and that's been something for me where I've really taken some pride in trying to break down those barriers. I mean, there's no reason by any conventional metrics that I should have been able to step in and build and run a business. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that I should do it in an industry that I've never been in before. It doesn't make sense. And obviously, it doesn't all come down to me at all. But that's kind of the point, is because playing soccer, I knew that.
Right.
It's not just you on the field, it's a team. And in different games, you have to play different roles, and you play different positions on the field, and it's okay. Like, I struggled as a defender playing soccer growing up with the offensive side of my game. Very late developer, probably like 17, 18 truly where it actually developed. That's very late for that aspect of my game. I was very good as a defender, good at communicating, anticipating, and a lot of other things, but offensively, terrible. But I was also okay with that. I didn't need to be, because we have offensive-minded players. I was a defensive-minded player, and the game hadn't evolved where that was as much of a requirement. And so I did my job very well, and I was content with that. And the same thing is true in business. Oftentimes, leaders think you have to be all things. And in most cases, you don't. You just have to be able to work and create a team of people who have the skills in the areas that you need, bring it all together, and now you have a team. And so, anyways, I think that that's a good use case of distilled principles.
Sure.
I've learned in something as innocuous as, playing soccer through my teenage years, and it's directly applicable to the principle of what it takes to lead in business, the humility you have to have for your position, and the expectations you have of yourself and your team around you. You can't get mad if your striker sucks at defending.
Right.
That's not their primary role, or maybe not even their tertiary role. And the same is true in business. If your salesperson sucks at inventory management, but you need them to play that, you have to manage your expectations of those things. And that's how you respond to those things can be something that dictates whether your business succeeds or not.
Sure.
Whether you know enough about the business or not, if you sufficiently piss everyone off by how you treat them, good luck.
Yeah.
And so anyways.
Could you speak maybe to like courage and how that falls in there? And I'm thinking about it in terms of like not having decision paralysis, or just I don't even know if it's self-belief or just the courage to not allow the fear of something to prevent you from proceeding with it. So like, for instance, a really silly example that I can give you from yesterday.
Okay.
I was given a call, drove out to the office to fix a printer.
Yeah.
I've never fixed a printer in my life.
Yeah.
But there was no part of me that thought, oh, I can't do that, so I'm not going to try. Like, I don't know if I could necessarily classify that as courage, but it's a willingness or an openness to attack something, knowing I've never done it before, but there's still a chance that I can get a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, yes, as innocuous as fixing a printer. But it does actually take a tremendous amount of courage, especially for some.
Yeah.
For others, that might be a little bit easier because courage, the obstacle of courage comes in different forms for people. But most people, especially in the professional setting, want to be seen as competent. So to take on a job that you're not obviously proficient in and so forth, in most people does require a level of courage. And I think if you experience instances where you have to demonstrate courage enough in your life and you've been able to reflect on them sufficiently, objectively, maybe not immediately, but at least after some time, then I think you start to become somewhat comfortable in those types of environments where you have to deploy a bit of courage, and it doesn't necessarily feel like you're deploying courage. And it's almost like it's almost like a muscle.
Yeah.
And that muscle gets stronger. And just like the resilience muscle that we kind of know a little bit more now, thank you, Andrew Huberman, David Goggins combo. But in the same vein, I see courage like that. And pretty much every chapter we're going to write is going to be like that. It's the developing of the thing. As it gets stronger, as you get better at it, things that require it, the lift feels a lot less. So as the analogy for listeners, if you're showing up to the gym for the first time and you put a 45 and a 45 on either end of a bar, and we say, okay, let's do a deadlift, that's 135. That might feel like quite a lot.
Sure.
And it is for where you are.
Yep.
Right? And then so, we're setting between each other and I put a second set of 45s, and that's insurmountable.
Yeah.
And it is, because you haven't practiced it enough, you haven't got the reps in. And it's almost like the Joe Rogan thing of like, the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. I don't know if that's actually his, but he's used it a few times.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for courage too. I can say that I came into business thinking I had a tremendous amount of courage. And by most traditional accounts, I absolutely did. I mean, doing a lot of the things in the military that I did, even though I didn't deploy to a combat theater of operation. But a lot of the things for most people take a tremendous amount of courage. I'm afraid of heights, and I became a paratrooper, jumped out of helicopters, airplanes. That was really hard for me because of that. And so I had to deploy a lot of courage in order to get that done. The lift for me was a lot heavier than people who aren't afraid of heights. Or like, I'm a fair bit claustrophobic. So firefighting, is a pretty big challenge at times, depending on the scenario and what we're doing, especially in the really confined spaces.
Yeah.
But my goodness, the level of courage that I needed to have in business, it doesn't come close. And so I thought I had a lot until the moments came where I really had to have it. And I've worked through those moments, and I've come to the other end of them, for whatever that looks like. And now I look back and they don't seem as bad, but they really were. And so that courage muscle for me is a lot stronger now. And I'm sure it's going to be tested again in the future, and I'm going to find a level where it feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I see that. And that goes to the development of it, right? I don't know if it's going to make its way into the book. I would really love it if we could figure out how to make it in the book. But I had this sort of like vision in my brain of like all of these characteristics and attributes. You can do it for technical skills. You can do it for so many things that make up a person. This bar graph, and you can kind of evaluate all of these attributes and characteristics, and where do you land on them? So if my courage is at 60, I want to get it to 80.
Yeah.
What am I going to need to do? What am I going to have to face? And sometimes we can voluntarily face some things. Unfortunately, with courage, sometimes we can't. Life throws really terrible things at us.
Sure.
But if we're committed to working through them, then if there is a silver lining for anything tragic and terrible, it's that cliche that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
Right.
And that is real. It's a cliche for a reason. But again, I think building some like more in-depth language around those cliched, oversimplified things, I think will help people digest it a lot better.
Sure. And that pulls me back to the whole like be a man thing.
Right.
It's super cliche and super vague, and like what does that even mean? And we could probably disagree on what that actually means in the context of what it means to be a man.
Sure.
But deeper into like what does it mean to be a good person or capable person, which is like the development and cultivation of all of these things that allow for a high level of domain transfer within the context of the book. That is certainly something that people need a common language for. We were talking earlier about where does responsibility fall. And to use another cliche, it legitimately does take a village to raise a child. And if you want there to be a culture change in that this is something everybody values, everybody can see the importance of the cultivation of these things, that generating or creating good people is obviously something that we want to do, regardless of discipline that they fall in, then absolutely, I guess the responsibility falls on everybody. But if people don't have the skill set, or they don't have the language, or they don't have the tools, somebody has to give it to them.
Yeah.
We've discussed the notion as well, you mentioned it earlier, of there being nothing new. It's the nature of the postmodern condition, right? There's so many levels, more cliche for you, the shoulders of giants, so to speak. But accessibility is a huge issue. People aren't looking back, or they aren't reflecting unless it's within a discipline that they studied. Particularly in young people, like they're not reading the Stoic philosophies, etc. And that's not to say that the Stoic philosophies cover everything as well. It does cover a lot. It's in a long-winded, roundabout way. I see the highest value in this programming and this book being that it provides that accessibility. If my parents didn't have it, it means they couldn't get it from somewhere, or they chose not to get it somewhere. Or their grandparents, or any coach or any teacher. I firmly believe that anybody who has the toolbox and the tools within it will see the high level of value. I don't think anybody could argue against it. It's so rock solid.
And to elaborate on that, one of the things that became clear to me is that a lot of people who find success they have this. It's like this innate thing inside of them.
Yeah.
The clearest version for me was when I read Jocko Willink's book, Dichotomy of Leadership, because his whole book is what I'm calling transferable everything. It's literal domain transfer that he's taken. He's built a whole beautiful business around it. He's wrote an incredible book. He's spoken to so many people. He's reached so many, probably millions of people. But what we want to achieve with Transferable Everything is how to do that as well.
Right.
So he's taken military experience, battlefield, battle-tested scenarios. He's described them. He's used storytelling, which is amazing. And he's distilled down these principles that he's learned through these experiences, and then he's applied them to business. So to hear like this Navy SEAL talk about that is incredible. Eric Davis, another Navy SEAL, beautiful book, Raising Men. Now, to your point, it isn't actually about raising men specifically. It is about raising good children, being a parent.
Yeah.
But he's taking everything he learned as a Navy SEAL. I can't remember. I assume he deployed. I can't recall. But he's taking all of these principles and he's applying them to parenting. And so the idea is like, okay, all of these very clearly successful people are doing this exact thing. Right. How can we help everyone else do the same thing? Because then they can successfully transfer no matter what, whether it's athletics, Daniel the soccer player, military, Daniel the soldier, Daniel the business person, selling or exiting your business, or, passing it on to succession, whatever the case is, we all have these big moments in our lives where we transition. Becoming a parent, massive transition. Your life does change in a meaningful and beautiful way, but also it's still very different than what your life once was. And so I think if there's language around how to still be you through those transitions, who you are, the collection of all those characteristics and attributes, and bring them with you, then every new adventure is from a higher level position, and there's continuity of who you are. This is just a new opportunity to add to those, or test or improve on those characteristics and attributes. And I've seen so many people struggle personally in the transitions, athletics, military.
Yeah.
I've seen it in business, even though that I haven't transitioned within business, but I've seen it with peers, and it's horrible, and it ruins in some cases people's lives, and it's horrible to see. And even if it doesn't visibly ruin their life, it maybe becomes the crux of a life that's underlived, and so I see some value here for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's interesting to me the leadership piece, particularly when speaking about like having a capacity for domain transfer.
Right.
So I personally haven't been in a position where I'm making like interdepartmental decisions, for instance. But I imagine if I were doing that,
just wait,
I would need to have a high capacity for domain transfer, because I need to understand all of the things that I'm either allowing people to take ownership over, or knowing when I need to reel it back in and make a decision for the team.
Yeah.
And you can, that has crossover in any team dynamic framework where somebody has to take ownership over the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And to stick with that theme of business, like one of the most important things in domain transfer, I mean, you kill it in this area, but whether you're jumping from business finance to operations to some form of legalities, whatever you're jumping across or within each day.
Sure.
Attention to detail. And so there's a story I share in the book about an experience I had in the military at a very, very basic level, actually in basic training. It's so simple and stupid and it seems frivolous, but I realized attention to detail is really important, because it doesn't matter if you're looking through a spreadsheet, you're analyzing your operations flows, or you're reading through a contract or some legal letter. Your ability to pay attention to the details is critically important. And so that's one that in a leadership role that I look for, in addition to the characters and virtues, but that's critically important, and that can be learned in any way. We've had people who have played different roles here, and I jokingly say, like, you know, if you're trying to build attention to detail as a skill, start with cleaning the washroom. You know, you don't have to clean the washroom; it's not your job. But if you want to, clean the washroom. This is training. Yeah. Clean the washroom. Come back to me, and ask me to go look at it, and I'll point out things you missed, and then you can fix them, and then come. Incredible.
Sure.
Because attention to detail is and always will be attention to detail, whether you're cleaning the bathroom or not. It's training your mind and your body to look in depth into the nuance and for things that are not surface level.
Yeah. It's a mental checklist, really,
Right.
when it comes to anything. And it's items that you've either assigned importance to or other people have assigned importance to. And I think there's maybe an element of humility within that as well, when it comes to attention to detail within, like, the scope of business, in that I might think it's frivolous or stupid and I don't need to pay attention to it, but Daniel has said that it is. So, like, regardless of whether or not I see the value in what he wants me to look for, he has told me to, and I have to look for it.
Sure.
And then maybe through experience, I'll begin to understand why you have found that thing to be important.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, RFPs. Massive documents, and I read the entire thing, even though I don't have to, because there's hidden nuggets in those bad boys.
There is.
All the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe it's for a small job. It's not really necessary to read the whole thing. I think it's always necessary.
Me too.
Yeah, just a silly one-off example there. But ultimately, I don't want to generalize and say as you, I'll say as me. As I go through these things and I build competencies and I broaden my scope of work, the mental checklist just grows.
Yeah.
I understand the importance for things or what I have to do, and I continue to upgrade that within myself. New firmware, essentially.
Exactly. Great analogy. And just to add on to that, the value becomes too, once you've built the checklist, you have the checklist, and now anything that's not on the checklist stands out.
Sure.
Like a sore thumb. And so that gives you the opportunity to be like, okay, I wasn't looking for this thing, but this other thing stood out, and do you have any answers to it, or does this make sense to you? And you can go ask questions.
Yeah.
And now you either add it to your checklist, or you've just raised something that needed to be addressed or whatever. So I think it's both things. It's the existence, looking for the things that are meant to exist, and then also the absence of things that should and are not present.
Yeah. To the point about leadership telling you to do something and you doing it because they've told you to do it.
Yeah.
I also go against the grain a little bit.
Okay.
In saying we're fairly fortunate within our organization that if somebody wants the why, nobody is going to shut them down and not give it to them.
Yeah.
So, like, me personally understanding why I have to do something also helps, because I'm not necessarily going to discern it right off the rip. But I will seek to understand. I guess that's just what I like to do. And I'm sure it helps other people as well. So, like, for instance, the bathroom analogy, I think that one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want such and such on the toilet seat. Yeah, me either. Right on. But understanding, I guess, the importance of things.
Yeah.
That's not always so intuitive.
Yes. I'll share the story anyways. I don't know if it's going to stay in the book. It is right now. But it's because it was so real for me in business when I stepped in. And I said earlier, like, I had no business getting into this position. But really, because I had no experience on paper. But really, I had a tremendous amount of experience. And this is something I argued when I was 22 years old, let's say, when the idea of transferable everything actually first came to my mind. And it was really around experience. And how much experience do you actually have and maybe actually need in a thing directly. So I'm in the military, we're doing a training exercise, and we were in the field and we're asked to do this thing. We're supposed to go out and put in this long fencing, concertina wire, and we're tamping in 6-foot pickets, putting in our concertina wire, and it was part of this broader exercise for not just like my regiment, but all of them. And it was late at night, it was rainy, we were hungry and tired, and we were told it was supposed to be quick, but it lasted so much longer. Everyone started to complain, myself included. I feel guilty for that to this day because I pride myself on not really being that person. But I got caught up in it, as it is easy to have happen.
It's infectious.
It is. It really is. And, it was a simple task. Tamping these 6-foot pickets, put up the concertina wire. We're not asking a lot, and fair play to that. The next day, after we woke up, after we got some sleep, or rack as they would say, we got up, and I think it was a sergeant. I just said, like, hey, Sarge, why do we have to do that? Like, it seemed so pointless and silly. And he was like, well, actually, in this broader exercise, we needed to put up that fence as an obstacle because the enemy is coming this way, and we need to funnel them to a point where we have infantry waiting for them. And so if we didn't get it done by a particular time, there's no obstacle, they get past the obstacle, and now they flank our infantry. And, military tactics, you get how that, that makes sense. And I remember thinking to myself, just quickly, like, wow, had they told me that last night, even though it's an exercise, understanding like, oh, we actually have a pretty critical role. It might feel like we're doing something stupid, but it's actually critical for this exercise, for the broader plan.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have complained. We probably, and I can speak for most of the guys, we probably worked a little bit harder had we understood that. It would have made sense to us in how we were contributing. And I remember that moment so clearly. And then fast forward to life later, and I'm in business, and now I'm responsible for a lot of people, and I'm giving a ton of direction. That moment, as soon as I step in that role, I remember that moment. And that's that underlying principle. It wasn't the experience of business and leadership and whatever. I was on the bottom end of that. I was the lowest person, really. But I got to experience it. I recognized what the underlying principle is providing the why, and understanding how that would have made us work harder and more efficient and so forth. And so immediately, I'm like, okay, I have to give people direction. Let me make sure you understand why.
Sure.
And if I forget, please ask me why if you need it.
Yeah.
And culturally, I think we're pretty good at that.
Yeah.
To your point. But I remember that as soon as I got in here, that moment stuck out. And so I think it's moments like those that you can actually learn a lot. And this, I don't know if you wanted to go deeper into that, but there's a bit of a transition for something I did want to bring up, which was that one of the things in structuring transferable everything and trying to provide a language and a framework is to do so in terms of these underlying principles, is to do so you can extract the principle immediately. You don't have to wait 10 years for hindsight and more experience. And so I learned that one immediately. Not every experience. So there's no perfection here. But that one I did, and it sort of got put away in a vault in my brain, and all of a sudden something that could benefit from it, I recall it and I pull it out. And so I think that's a big opportunity, because a lot of us do grow and we look back with hindsight and we reflect later in life maybe. And so the part of the idea is, how can we do that more immediately, so we don't have to wait for that growth per se.
Instant feedback.
That's right. Or as instant as it can be. And sometimes maybe it's not just doing it yourself. Maybe you need a supporting resource that understands the same language to work things out with them and get to the bottom of a thing. But I think that as well would benefit people individually within their own lives, their lives professionally, and there would actually be a huge downstream impact to businesses who are employing professionals who might be thinking in these terms, because all of a sudden their experience and knowledge base just starts to expand exponentially.
Sure.
I don't know if you have any experiences or any thoughts on that, but I do have moments personally where I look back at decisions I made 10 years ago and I just think, oh my goodness. And you know, there's a chapter for that as well.
Yeah.
Forgiveness. And the focal point of that, and obviously we'll talk about it on that episode, is yourself. Forgiving yourself. But you know, you can look back, and now I have, you know, more experience, obviously more mature, and and I just think, oh, you know.
Yeah, there are certainly things I can look back on and cringe about my past. Like, I wish I would have conducted myself a little better. Yeah. Or I had a very immature mindset. Or even just like a weird veil over the scenario where I was viewing it completely different than the reality of the situation.
Right.
I don't have a ton, I don't think.
Yeah.
There's one in particular, which it's not even a super big one, but I'd written a script for script writing class in university.
Something he's very good at, by the way.
Anyways. I can't recall if I shared this one with you.
Okay.
But I recall the professor taking a liking to this one in particular. And she was an accomplished scriptwriter herself. And I remember being told, like, I really want to discuss this with you. I think it's great. And then I didn't show up to the last class where I would have had the opportunity to do that.
Oh.
Yeah. Who knows why? At the time, strategically, I was choosing what classes I would go to or what assignments to even really try on, because I was kind of checked out of the program at the time. I was really just finishing it to finish.
Yeah.
So that one just didn't feel like it was necessary to go to. And to be fair, I didn't really put a lot of value into the work that I was producing. So I was like, what do I care? Like, my professor likes my script. Why would I want to talk about it? But there's the what if now. But like, you know, what wisdom might she have given me, or what positive criticisms that could have changed my development? Or even if I didn't continue to pursue that field or that scope of work, right? It could have changed how I reflect on myself or celebrate my victories, for instance, which is something that we've spoken about, right? That is certainly one. Might have gotten away from the the topic of conversation, but there's a lot to be said about one's mindset broadly. Even when you're in a scenario where you don't think you're going to be benefiting or gaining anything.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was a loss regardless of what I did at the time. I'm like, I'm studying this thing, this is a professor, or it is what it is. But I missed a great opportunity. And I don't even mean she would have been like, oh, this is great, we're going to publish this. This is going to be like, I don't think about it in those terms. I just mean like, I could have developed more as an individual at the time, but I was also an 18-year-old idiot. Yeah.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think it's a good example, because there are these moments when you look back on it and you can reflect on it. But had you have learned that in the moment, then maybe, and maybe this is true, but the idea would be that, okay, well, you don't make that mistake again. Right. And you've learned that principle. You're not going to let it happen. And then you're not also walking through life as if, you know, the smallest things don't matter.
Sure.
Because they do. Now, okay, you know, for the hyper efficient focused people, and I can appreciate this, I dismiss a lot of frivolous things that I just don't have time to do because I'm working on these things. They're bigger, and I need to focus time there. But that's not what I mean. I mean little experiences that can teach a lot. I think that's why there's the expression "don't cry over spilt milk," right? Like it's for a reason. But there's a deep principle there of your ability to control your emotions over small things. You know, the happiness that you can build within your life is at least in part predicated on how you respond. If we, this leads us to Stoicism, how you respond to the things that happen to you. And, if spilt milk is going to cause you to be deeply upset, it's
really good milk.
Maybe it's really
Gotta
great
get the
milk.
macros in.
Yeah. In that case, I can appreciate it. No. Then it's going to make things difficult, and it's something for you to reflect on and think on. And if you have an experience where something small happens and it bothers you, and then it sort of ruins your day, and you can reflect on that same night to be like, look, this small thing happened and it kind of ruined my day. I missed all of these other wonderful, beautiful things, and that's impacted my happiness. And, you can think about the outcomes and the rippling effects of that. And then you can say, without waiting 5 years of unhappiness, to say, okay, look, I need to figure out how I don't respond so negatively to this small thing that happened, and really get control, because I want to have a happy, beautiful life. And I don't want to oversimplify that for people who struggle.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? This is largely for people where it's just sort of their outlook needs some work.
Oh man, I used to be that guy where big things didn't bother me, but the smallest thing would completely put a doorstop on me. And it crowds the mind and you obsess over it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's one of the interesting parts about now working with you on this, is that there's a more diverse set of experience in things that we've struggled with. That's not something that I've struggled with. I recognize it, and we'll write about it. Forgiveness, let's say, is something that I've really struggled with. Like even something small that I'm like, oh, I screwed that up. That'll haunt me. Something small will haunt me that I screwed up. I'll apologize for it. Outwardly, you won't see it, but in my head, I'm like, Daniel, you idiot. And I self-deprecate over it and so forth. But, I think to give Stoicism its place here, which it more than deserves, is that's a good scenario where I think so many people misrepresent the intentions of Stoicism. Is that, even if that moment is going through your head, that doesn't mean it needs to control your outward expression.
Yeah.
And that's largely what Stoicism is. It doesn't mean you're not feeling or experiencing. It means you're working through it, but you're not allowing it to become this outward expression of yourself. You're controlling how you project those emotions.
Sure.
It's not the absence of the feeling, though. And that's something really important.
Yeah, but and I've only scratched the surface with Stoicism. I've only read so much.
Yeah, of course. Me too.
But one of my takeaways has been that, in other words, to what you just said, is you can't control a situation, but you can control how you respond to a situation.
Yeah.
And I even go a layer deeper than how I physically or outwardly respond. It made me think about how I rationalize things and respond to things emotionally.
Right.
So, I can be deeply upset about something, or would have been, but now I can approach it so much more level-headed and cool.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is a practice as well. You have to be intentional about that.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's the intentional component. And I learned some of this when I was going through recovery from an injury. Was intentional practice of a thing repeated over and over again created an outcome. And in my case, it was one that I couldn't even imagine that I could achieve because it far exceeded what I thought was maybe possible.
Yeah.
But really, the medicine and that of what it was like really practice. It was an inoculation treatment.
Yeah.
Repeated practice into the space, inoculation over and over again, pushing the limits ever so slightly over and over and over again. And I think general development is the exact same way. That's literally that was messing in my brain with proprioception and, kind of like my nervous system, my autonomic nervous system. But the same thing I believe is true cognitively, like in our actual brain function of how we think, and it's the same work with intentional practice, thinking through the things, small exposures over and over and over again, and it strengthens. The hard part is it's not tangible. We can't exactly see it. Although, back to the beginning, that Andrew Huberman, the Andrew Huberman thing about the frontal cortex and the part of the brain that they can see develop when you do hard things. I think they've asserted that you can see it actually grow.
Sure.
When you do hard things. I don't know if that's going to be true for everything and beyond grit, but I think somewhere in something that we can't see is true. We just can't put our finger on it scientifically and tangibly.
Right.
But it feels true from my own anecdotal experiences and those I've observed around me. And to be fair, that's a lot of what this book is going to be about. It's not going to be necessarily scientific exploration of studies and so forth. And maybe one day there's a place for Transferable Everything to do that, or somebody else does, which would be beautiful. But it's very much a compilation of anecdotal observations, historical reference, and personal experience. Okay, so you actually brought up a really good point. I don't know what we can keep of this and riff on it, but this has been the challenge of writing thus far. I was speaking earlier today with sort of like a business coach, and I was explaining to him about the book, the idea, the premises, and all of that. And one of the ways that I tried to explain to him of why it's so challenging is there's a dichotomy of two major premises. It's very broad. There's one of the chapters is on grit, where Angela Duckworth wrote a whole beautiful book about grit, and it's just a chapter. And arguably, all of the other chapters could have the same level of depth of book that Angela wrote for her book, Grit.
Yeah.
And so it becomes so hard to take all of these things. And I knew this one was going to be hard in terms of getting on the mics for the very first time.
Yeah.
Because it's the introduction. So we're kind of broadly covering all things.
Yeah. To use a visual metaphor, I see it as opening the front page or the cover of this book is the door to a hallway of dozens more doors.
Yeah.
Effectively, you're helping show people the way, essentially pulling back to what we've said.
Yes.
And acknowledging that there are many more doors to open and walk through should you wish to explore the subject matter in greater depth.
It's funny you say that, because that's almost exactly how I described it when I was speaking to this individual. Not with the door metaphor, but he had asked me a question. He said, how do you plan to write this book without it being sort of like preachy? Which is a good question. It was at the beginning. Yeah. And I was like, I think it just comes down to the intent. And the intent is it's an offering. That's how I see it. It's an offering or an invitation. Hey, I've found this way. Do you want to go on a journey with me?
Right.
And that's how I've tried. I've wanted to write it. And I hope we can keep that same message, because I don't like to be the self-help person per se, that unless there are moments for it where it's like, okay, like just do this.
Yeah.
Do this now. Do what I say, kind of thing. But really, it's just the invitation for somebody to maybe want to look at something through a different lens, go on a bit of a journey of self-exploration, or look at life or problems through a new lens, and And so that's where I kind of saw that overlap of that door metaphor and that invitation.
Yeah.
Where
effectively, like I think I've said this to you before. Again, all of these texts, these notional ideas exist.
Yeah.
Are people seeking them out?
Yes.
And frequently people try to repackage ideas, and that's history, really.
Yeah.
It's making something accessible to a new audience and doing it in a way that they will understand that fits the context of the time.
Yeah.
I could walk into a library and pull a dozen books off the shelf and take it upon myself to learn things, but again, you're opening the first door.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily think you'll be able to teach any given reader everything with this book.
Yeah.
But you're exposing them.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity for enrichment. I wouldn't even call it self-help. Because you're not suggesting the reader needs to be helped.
Right.
You're suggesting that this will enrich your life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, I struggled with some of that. And as you know, because we talked about it, the repackaging portion. But where I landed was, not to put myself and us in the Elon Musk category, obviously. But what he did with rockets is incredible. He wasn't the first person to create rockets or the technology behind it, but he did repackage it into a way where you can reuse rockets, and that changed everything.
Sure.
Still, but it was still the same thing. Parts might have been new, but there's historical science and physics that got us to that point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? And that was something that I struggled with, because I'm like, I just feel like all the stuff that we're writing about is stuff that's like, it's all been written before.
Yeah.
But it's the structure, the packaging, the framework, the language,
right,
and bringing it all together. And I feel a lot more confident about that. But I struggled with my own confidence around it, and the who am I and all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, like, he didn't discover the principles of aerodynamics, for instance.
Yes.
He might have leveraged that with his engineering team.
Yeah.
But like, much of what human beings can or will discover up until this point, and I say that up until this point because, with the AI,
it's a good place to
go.
go.
So forth, there's a vast unknown in front of us. But as far as pre-AI innovation goes, I feel like I don't know if I would actually hinge on that. I was gonna say, like, we've hit a pretty high ceiling, I guess, to put it in different terms. I don't think we've reached the cap of what's possible for human beings to do, because clearly we're innovating with AI right now. So I'll retract my statement. But so much of what we have is foundational and iterative.
Yeah. Yeah, I think iteration is the key word there, and that's all this is. That's largely what this is: iterating on something that's already existed.
Yeah,
and I think also acknowledging that and recognizing it's important. I think there's been lots of stuff that I've read, and I was afraid to be perceived as this, if I'm honest, where it's like, okay, here's a book, but it's not really acknowledging the history behind the ideas. Even if you do reference like a particular person, like, these concepts or ideas have existed for a long time.
Sure.
Even if you're sort of claiming them as your own, and in some ways they are, and we've talked about that too, but I think just at least acknowledging it is kind of,
I mean, much,
important.
if not most of nonfiction has a series of references or citations at the end of the work.
Yeah.
And that compounds over time.
Yeah.
People are always exploring ideas and teasing ideas and maybe trying to iterate a little bit, like what can I add to this?
Yeah.
And if all you can add to it is simply making a really good idea more accessible to people because it's important and other people don't see that, that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But I think working my own brain around that has been quite a challenge.
Sure.
And I was humbled to it, but I had fear. This is another thing that hasn't actually made its way too much into the book, fear itself, but outside of its reference and courage. But I had a lot of fear about being how the ideas or I would be perceived in reference to the historical nature of everything. But that's something that I've come to manage and wrap my head around so much more.
I love fear. No. When we were talking about courage, the thing I like about fear is that it's there for a very good reason. It's self-protection. I mean, if you take all of like the weird, wacky like frameworks that modern society has, why does fear exist? It's to keep you alive.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you get into like a business scenario or other scenarios, you're kind of wrestling with your lizard brain and trying to figure out why you're feeling this way or why the stakes are high here and low here and what have you. But if you have a handle on that, fear as a control mechanism is a very important signal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think working through that, and that's where a lot of the reflection comes in. I think a lot of the work through fear is reflecting on it. Yeah. Because you have the lizard brain and you need to contrast that with objective reasoning and reflection of both yourself. Because oftentimes fear is coming from a place. Sometimes it's fear of the thing because it's keeping you alive, and sometimes it's irrational because it's reminding you of a past event that's happened. Yeah. And so that level of self-analysis, self-reflection, that can first begin with, okay, like how rational is this? And then from there, okay, where's this coming from? And trying to work back, not to oversimplify trauma and things like that. But, oftentimes fear does have a root of either a story you've told yourself about a thing or something that has actually happened to you that's been formative, whether traumatic or not. It can still inform part of who you are today. And having some, respect for that, and then maybe realizing that, okay, maybe this is something that I need to work through.
Yeah, I don't think people should fear fear.
Sure.
In that many people put themselves inside this padded room of safety, of avoiding discomfort. Yeah. Where, like I said, it's a very important signal. If you fear fear or avoid it altogether, you're not given the opportunity to reflect on why you felt fear.
Right.
When you put up those walls, you create maybe a kind of lens that distorts the truth.
Sure. It's a good nod to one of my favorite authors, Ryan Holiday. The Obstacle is the Way. It's one of his books. It's one of the pillars, really, of Stoicism. And now, that's not inherently true all the time. Sure. Sometimes the obstacle should be avoided. Yeah. But the title works for exactly what is. Yeah. But if you
ignore or you don't even humor thinking about what that obstacle may be because you've put up like a fake obstacle in front of the true obstacle, you don't actually get an opportunity to reflect and piece things apart.
Yeah, that's right.
And maybe it is something that is worth being fearful about, but you need to confront it. You can't just allow that to be hiding in the corner.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's where, and we'll get into this more with the chapter on courage. A lot of that begins with exploring the inner citadel. And I think that's, we'll get into that, like I said, with courage, but like that's a lot of where the growth comes from. Yeah. But it's arguably the thing that requires the most courage of all is our own darkness, our own fears, and facing and confronting those things. And it's funny because in business, so many people think that in business there's strategy and tactics, and those things are true, and it's important to be a good strategist and have all of these things. But for the most part, if I was to coach a business person, I would just begin with themselves. Most of the business development comes from unlocking the founder, the executive's own self. I've seen that time and time again. And to be fair, it's arguably true with athletes. So many athletes can get in their own way and, hurt their development and, because they haven't spent enough time looking inward and confronting the depths and the dark places inside of themselves. And there's so many instances, at least in the soccer world, which obviously I know well, of extremely talented, gifted players that can't make that final leap. And they grow up as these like prodigies that are supposed to be incredible, and that there's that final leap. And I would argue, at least in part, that the most of that leap is inside of themselves and has nothing to do with your skill and your technical mastery. Right. It's really the characteristics and the virtues, and so I look at that as well with athletes. And business people have kind of figured this out a little bit. There's a lot of business coaches out there.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe there's some mindset coaches and psychology coaching and stuff with athletes now a little bit more, but definitely not at the level of a curriculum. And I think that's something that could be interesting for Transferable Everything, that companion along the journey, where it's not just, okay, I'm in a moment of crisis, so now I need somebody. Yeah. Or, okay, I finally made it, so I'm going to work with somebody on mentality, or right. I'm close. Why not develop those along the way with intention? Sure. You're passively doing it anyways. Everyone will agree. That goes back to the Disney movies of these really cool coaches and sports success stories. You're already passively doing it. Why not add just a bit of intention behind it? It's a really great sandbox for learning.
It's also another, if we're talking about like coaching and actualization and skill building broadly speaking, it's just another option for somebody who has agency and is willing to take extreme ownership over their outcomes.
Yeah.
We've spoken in the past about like, how do you choose your mentor, or like, how do you know the people who are coaching you are actually coaching you on the correct things?
Yeah.
And so the more access to resources you have, it gives you better opportunity to understand or pick those mentors a little more intentionally.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that goes back a little bit to the point where I had sort of called out parents of athletes, and recognizing that your child's coach in whatever the sport is, especially team sports, is to focus on the team. And that's true, even though they'll get other supplementary benefits from it and so forth. But if you actually go into the tactics of it, a lot of the advice that they're going to give you about your child's development and stuff like that, you have to recognize that it is still coming from a place that's swayed by the needs of the team. Well, concurrently, your responsibility is solely the development of your child as an athlete and as a person. And so once you've recognized that, or you've accepted that, then maybe you can be more intentional about additional supplementary training that you can provide them, right, where you introduce them to another coach whose focus is on their growth and development, and can be analyzed through a bit of a different lens. And you'll get feedback from the team coach of, oh, they're progressing really well. I see them improving in their performance and so forth. But you can also get some feedback from the individual trainer. So maybe the team coach is saying like, your child's struggling in these areas, and the individual coach is saying, no, they're very proficient. And then you might be thinking, okay, so either the gap there is, simply it's subjective evaluation. And so there's a gap between that, or maybe there's something happening in between. Maybe the environment that your child's training in with that individual coach is conducive, where they're flourishing actively in that environment, and maybe the other environment isn't as conducive and they're struggling. So like the skill's there, but either the environment they're struggling with or the attributes they have to flourish in that environment need development as well.
Right.
And so there's so much to unpack inside of that. But I think it's the intentional application of trying to achieve some kind of outcome. And I think in the case of Transferable Everything, everyone wants to have courage, a sufficient amount. Hopefully most people would like humility and grit and work ethic and, a lot of these other chapters. And you can with intention. If you make it an objective, I would like to improve in this. Okay, how do we do that?
Yeah.
What do we expose ourselves to in order to have that happen? And in most cases, it's not actually exposure. It's just a deep reflection and understanding of the things you're already being exposed to begin with, which creates the accessibility.
Right. And a further note on accessibility, and this is a little bit different, but in terms of accessing coaches or team sports, like not everybody necessarily has the means or the opportunity to do that either.
Yeah.
So again, just having additional avenues for people to get that same kind of experience through alternate means, I think is a great, great thing.
Totally.
I can't recall if I've asked you in these terms, but like ultimately, I guess there are a few domains in which it can be applied. Like if someone were to master the principles, all of them, or bring themselves up to the highest level of competency they can in each, if we see that as being like one way of saying that's what the objective is.
Yeah.
What in other terms does that mean? So like in business, does that mean I'm making you the best potential business person outside of specific technical skill? Or same with sports or any other domain? Does it just simply distill down to I want you to be the best individual that you can be?
Yeah. It does become entirely a development thing, because if you're the best in these areas that we're describing, then it means you're not just the best professional or the best athlete. You're probably the best parent that you can be. You're the best spouse that you can be, the best friend, family member, etc. And then we'll sort of take this from the Jordan Peterson-esque idea, which this will actually come later in section 3 of the book, which is like, okay, now what? What do we do with that? And I believe that it's then that you start to look beyond and how you can contribute more of service to the community. Now, to be clear, and we'll talk about it more in depth, but I think being of service to others is a critically important part of developing these characteristics and attributes. So I don't mean just like volunteering at like a soup kitchen or something, which is beautiful and you're going to learn a lot, you're going to grow a lot. But I mean a bigger role of service in your community and continue to extend that beyond. And I think one of the things we've struggled with, people have identified, we're starved for leadership today in many ways, in different domains within society. And I think it's in part because so many people want to get into leadership positions without doing the work.
Sure.
Right.
And you also have the added complexity and layers of like disagreement and division, which potentially could be solved by everybody cultivating these attributes.
Exactly. The shared foundation of knowledge and the lens that we're looking through is at least there's some level of a equal playing field, which you kind of had described near the beginning. And I think there's like a humility within that, right? You've suspended the ego. I got to go to work.
Right.
When I was in my very, very early 20s, I was speaking publicly for a nonprofit organization, and that was great. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed educating and sharing knowledge and hearing feedback from people, or bringing things up of why they might have disagreed with the knowledge that was shared for that nonprofit. And then I started being asked if I could speak about other topics, and I was happy to do so because I felt like at that point, I really just had my soccer experience and living on the streets in France, and then for a very short period of time, but then really living on my own, and then with friends and all of that, while pursuing my dream of becoming a professional soccer player. So I could lean on that. So I talked about things like short-term, long-term goals, saying no, even though I wasn't perfect on that, but like I definitely resisted quite a lot for especially my peers in my area of saying no to a lot of things that everyone else was saying yes to. And so like I could talk about those things, but I also realized that not just because I was young and not because of inexperience, because I don't correlate those things, but I had some of these more broader ideas, and I felt like they needed to be tested more in the crucible of the world, and that I needed to not get experience, like I said, but test these ideas, and transferable everything is really one of them. I had no idea how it would play out, and it did, and it ended up actually testing me in these ways, and it's before I ever even wrote the book. But it was also the idea that, why should people listen to me? I haven't tested everything I'm talking about myself. I'm regurgitating what someone else has said, and being a conduit for a message is important too. But I do think there is something about testing a lot of the things within your life, and again, that is intentionally very different than experience, because I don't see them as the same thing. And you can speak to it with more passion and confidence and conviction. And I say that to say that I think that was the right decision, even though it put me through a lot of hard things that I wish I didn't maybe have to go through, instinctively anyways. But I think there's a huge lack of that from leadership today. And I think we would benefit more from people working inside of themselves before they start telling everybody else what to do. And only then can you really, but then once you start to spread your wings and step more and more into leadership roles, you still have to keep coming back. So that framework that will be in section 2, it's cyclical. It's not one and done.
Yeah.
You're going to keep returning and cycling through that framework for hopefully the rest of your life.
Well, we don't necessarily need to keep this in.
Hit it.
My ask about what the objective, I guess, is ultimately.
Sure.
And how many layers can we strip that down to? More of a curiosity. So if the aim is to help people on their path towards actualizing and cultivating things that you see to be virtuous and important for society, then and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but for me there's an implication that clearly society is missing these things in a big way.
Sure.
So if we take the book as a tool for an individual to become the thing that our current broken society needs, what does the goal become for the collective beyond the individual actualization?
I don't know I can say that, if I can.
Yeah, no, it's a big ass question.
Yeah, and I don't know I've thought through that.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I've struggled with on this journey, similar to the business one, to be honest, I don't necessarily want to run a business per se, or be the leader that instructs people on what to do. I have no interest in that. I like the idea of business because it solves problems. I don't like the idea of business where you have people working for you and you tell them what to do. I understand that it's part of it. Obviously, I do it.
You can't do everything.
Yeah. But I don't like that. I don't like telling somebody what to do or giving them instruction. But I'm willing to do it because in the business case, there was a need.
Yeah.
And so fine. So I'll do it. And I would be more than happy if there was someone that would be more than happy to take over, do a better job, and all of that. I'd be ecstatic with that. And kind of the same thing is true here. I didn't really get that far. I felt like there was a need, and I kind of felt called to share, if you will. Like I felt like I could offer something to people, and where that's kind of as far as I got is the individual. But I also think there's this weird dichotomy where we've lost what it means to be part of a team. And we've lost the sanctity of the individual as I think they're intended to be, which is still a contributing member of a team. But everything has become about me. And it sounds like that serves you, but it doesn't. And so it feels very clear to me that there's a need. And so I guess I just got to a place where I felt like, okay, I think that this can help people. And so it's an offering. Maybe it helps nobody, and maybe no one reads it. And in a weird way, I actually became okay with that. And hopefully it means because everyone's, doing great and they're flourishing and that's amazing. But I just felt the sense of responsibility for the individuals to put this out there.
Right.
And if it can help, then amazing. Could it help society more broadly? I think so. But I don't know that I can think about how it will or what should happen.
Yeah, I mean,
if that makes sense.
If we're talking like society broadly, it's a very tall ask.
Yeah.
To be able to cause a culture shift so dramatic.
Yeah.
You change the pulse.
Yeah.
Or the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
However, I often think about what's missing or what's gone wrong.
Sure.
And that could be an entire episode, and probably one that we would have to cut up like crazy.
Yeah, it totally would.
But certainly on a microcosmic level, you already have affected change through this.
Sure. I guess.
And
that's
so
a hard thing for me to digest. But
and so you just broaden the sphere.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, in relinquishing control in business may eventually be relinquishing control over this, in that you allow other people to take it and run with it and broaden the sphere through which it falls.
I would be more than delighted. I mean, you and I have spoke probably, I don't know, a year and a half ago. Like, this has been somewhat slow moving and also moving quickly at the same time. But we've had discussions, and you've seen me wrestle with the idea of putting stories in of myself and not, because I don't want it to be about me at all. I want to offer up the ideas, and I hope somebody takes them and builds on them truly, because then it improves everyone, the idea, maybe society more broadly. And that's why I became okay with offering it into the world, that hopefully someone way smarter and brighter can take that. And
I don't even think they need to be smarter and brighter, to be fair. Just in that, I was thinking, what an interesting media campaign it would be if you did a quick interview format where like you would cut yourself out of it, but it would be just people talking about experiences here, how it was deduced, and then how it was reapplied in another scenario. That could be a massive series.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
And it wouldn't take too much to have an impact. I know.
Like a bit of a street series.
Sure.
Yeah. That'd be a fun one too.
Human experience, despite how broad it can be due to cultural differences or what have you, we're all very, very similar.
Yeah.
We can relate to almost anything because you embody it, you take it, you try. I think people, they're already doing these things, I think.
Yeah.
Now that I'm talking about it, like, you do observe the world through your own lens. You kind of reflect it or bounce it against things that have already happened to you, or at least I do, to try to make it apply or for me to understand the emotional like depth or weight of a story that you've told me. There's kind of like a cross analysis where I'm going like, have I experienced something similar? This is how I reacted, this is how I responded, but not necessarily in terms of distilling what they got out of it,
right?
And how I could get that. There's already a level of comparison happening.
Totally.
So I think if like you can broaden or allow people to use a certain language that makes it easier to extract and reapply and allow yourself, it's basically what is happening.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in terms of that like little video initiative.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. And
because you can, and sorry to cut you off,
go ahead.
You're effectively demonstrating how universal it is.
Yes.
So many different people of different walks of life, profession, creed, etc., are experiencing things. They have the ability to reflect upon those things and then apply those things intelligently with intent if they know how.
Yeah. And I think through that we'll probably also find out some answers to some things that maybe we don't quite know. Like, okay, if maybe a lot of people can really, really do it, but then like, why isn't it happening?
Yeah.
Where's the gap in application? Now, from my experiences so far, a lot of people are not doing it. And so like it's anecdotal, but in those transitional moments I've seen, even in big groups, leaving the military, going to a resume writing class, and all of these people with way more experience and much greater careers than my measly military career had. But listening to them saying things like, I just blew shit up, shotguns, what are people in the professional world going to care about me? And a friend of mine who left the military, as he was preparing to leave, I said to him, wow, you're going to kill it in the civilian world. And he was like, why? And I said, because when someone asks you to do something, you do it. And he started laughing like, what? Doesn't everybody do that? And anyone who works in any job knows that that's not actually true. Yeah. And I don't mean it to be like, yeah, because everyone fucks around except for in the military. But there's a depth to it that in the military, somebody asks you to do something, you don't ever have to think twice. That's getting done.
Yeah.
No matter what, they're gonna complete that task. It's programmed into them. And so like anyone who's worked in any business, that's why people, or one of many reasons why people like to hire retired military, is that's a great example.
Yeah.
It's gonna get done.
We're short on time, but I want to get this out because I think it's interesting. Crossed my mind. It sounds like he diminished his experience.
Yes.
And that's why he felt that his skill set built in one area couldn't apply elsewhere.
Yes.
And so worth thinking about why people diminish their experiences and how we can get people to see the value in their experiences. An interesting research project would be looking to the past to see how often people diminish their experiences versus celebrating and embracing them versus now. And does that have to do with the comparison exacerbated by social media, in that we see a doctored version of people's greatness plastered online all the time? And so my experiences don't or shouldn't be celebrated because they're nowhere near as great as the things I'm seeing on my feed every day.
This was always a big thing in the military, right? It was, I would be called a 5-jump chump. Okay. And fine, I take that, right? I didn't jump beyond the 5 jumps I needed for getting my course, passing my course. And, there's reasons for that are beyond my control. And okay, so I'm that. But I went into that experience and I was so proud, excited to get, my maroon beret, my wings, and so forth. And immediately it was, who cares? You got 5 jumps. You don't have 10. And then it was like, well, you don't have a water jump, or whatever the case may be. It was just like, there was never enough. There was never a moment to celebrate. And there's a bit of that culturally. And I think that is a bit systemically in society as well.
Right. Well, everybody's flexing.
Yeah.
No matter what domain you're in,
Yes.
you know, there's a culture of nothing is ever good enough.
Yes, exactly. And I can appreciate the culture of not good enough for me wanting to pursue more, because
Sure.
that was true. That same night I got my maroon beret, that's a pivotal moment. I'm molding my beret, looking in the mirror, water running down my face because you got to soak it wet. And I'm thinking, I can't wait for the next one, which is a level up. I didn't even give it time to breathe. But to be fair, it still didn't actually take away from how proud I was to have achieved something so hard and so significant, and took me. It took a lot from me as well.
Yeah, I don't see enough of, or I see more people saying I'm not good enough versus how great I'm going to be.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. They say comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Yes.
Everybody is diminishing their experience because they see other people presenting a filtered, doctored, airbrushed version of themselves at all times.
Precisely. It's hyper performative, and it has rippling effects. But I think I don't blame the thing. Hopefully we can help everyone at the individual level see beyond that.
Right.
So to wrap up this episode, this being the very first episode of the Transferable Everything podcast, I want to express a lot of gratitude to you and to everybody that's been helping build and support us on this journey. We're currently producing this in an empty warehouse, not in the beautiful space that we would like to one day, on phones rather than with cameras. And we're by no means a finished product. I hope none of the things we say or express speak to that. I hope everyone can take the opposite and understand that we're like our own lives, like every aspect of our lives, and everyone who's listening, we're a work in progress here with the podcast. And I hope that we can provide value to as many people as possible. And I hope they'll find it interesting enough to join us for the ride, especially this particular one, because the idea for this, like I said, is going to be to lay ourselves bare, myself in particular, for Transferable Everything, and going on this really challenging journey to finally finish writing this book that I've wanted to for the past 15 plus years. I've been struggling through for the past year and a half or so, and am still currently struggling with. And so it'll probably be an interesting journey, and maybe something beautiful could come from it. Who knows? Maybe we could actually achieve something in recognition, a Wall Street Journal or something, and get on some lists. But ultimately, it's only because that means that more people have found value, and that's largely the intention. Is to create value for as many people as possible.
Right on.
So thank you, everybody. I from the bottom of my heart, I deeply appreciate taking the time out of your day to listen, and that's it.